Great. Well, thanks everybody for joining today. So this is our fifth meeting, which is great because I feel like we haven't just been holding meetings, uh, you know, to talk. Although we do get to talk and it's fun and I really enjoy the conversations. But I feel like we're making really good progress. So let's get into it. I forgot to update this. So pardon me, the agenda is a little out of date. I thought I was all ready for this call and apparently I'm not. I did update the slides, but I forgot to update the agenda. So we are gonna do housekeeping. I'll talk big picture status, but then we're gonna have a different focus. Chris is going to do the bhyve manageability update, but Antronig, he gave that update last week or last time we met, so that's not happening. Joe, you're not on the hook for the AD side of this. I'll handle that. But Joe, if you have any update, oh hey Antronig, if you
Hello.
have any how you doing? If you have any update about, if you could just like briefly talk about where we are with the OpenJDK thing, that would be cool. And then I am actually going to talk about all these things that you see listed here. So sorry for that miss on my part. So housekeeping, we record. I'll either send the link out. I didn't realize that you could do this, that you can just send the link out to directly to Zoom. So I think I might have done that last time. So you'll either get the link to the recording, which will be hosted on Zoom, or it'll be hosted on YouTube. Let's make sure that we stick to the FreeBSD code of conduct. We all do that. So I feel like I probably don't need this anymore, but I feel like it's probably wise to just keep it in there for, for just hygiene. Housekeeping, we're moving. So I've heard loud and clear from a handful of, more than one person. It's been several people who have said that the Google Groups messages just isn't working. It's like it's either not showing up in their inbox, it's showing up weird, it's hard to follow. And that's like the last thing that any of us need. So the folks on the Postmaster team, Philip and Baptiste, have been great, have set up a mailing list for us. Yes, thumbs up, exactly. It just got set up. Like I literally got the email today. So I have subscribed and I've sent a test, but none of that has actually gone through yet. So it may be the case that this has to like settle for a day or two before everything's rocking and rolling, but the link isn't going to change, right? The name of the mailing list isn't going to change. So, take note of it. Maybe you'll have better luck than I did with subscribing. It might be because like I'm sort of like the moderator that I'm not seeing some of these things. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, like I'm excited about that. So I appreciate everybody being a good sport and bearing with me when I kind of just did it quick and dirty with Google Groups. But it became pretty quickly apparent to me that that was not the right way for us to communicate. So we're going to do it the FreeBSD way. And I'm excited about that. So with that, right, this is kind of big picture where we are. So we've assessed interest. We've got now like 70 people in the working group. We've chartered it. We've compiled the list of gaps. We've prioritized the list of gaps, and we are now executing our plan. And that's what we're going to spend the rest of the time today talking about. So with that, I'm going to hop over to Chris's slides. Are you guys seeing bhyve management? You are?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right, sweet. Well, I'm gonna give my voice a break and give your ears a break from listening to me. I'm gonna go on mute, and Chris, it's over to you.
Okay. So let's go to the first slide, please. Next one. So I think it's a good starting point to really remind us that recently Broadcom finalized their acquisition of VMware, and I think when we look at this from the project management perspective, this is what I would usually call a positive risk or an opportunity. So I think we can definitely make use of that in, reminding people that there's bhyve, and while there isn't the whole shebang in terms of functionality when you compare it to VMware, I still believe in the whole picture, particularly in the setting of FreeBSD in combination with CFS. I think there is a really great offering that that is totally worthwhile to remind people that we have that. And if people are, let's say, unhappy where things are moving, they definitely should be looking at bhyve and FreeBSD overall. Right. So let's move to the next one. Right. So what happened since the last time? First of all, obviously, we continued to work on the product requirements document that has grown to, I think, like 14 pages already. And I'm now in this kind of weird space where I'm considering to actually make it more terse again and kind of take stuff out and maybe, I don't know, move it to the wiki so things stay legible and easier to digest, particularly for people that come to this topic as a new member. Otherwise, they see 14 pages and it's quite some time to read. I continue to join the weekly calls for Jails and bhyve whenever I could. Actually, I failed to show up for two of them. Once I didn't manage to show up for because of time constraints. On the other hand, I was sick, unfortunately, the last few days, but I managed to recuperate, fortunately. And we also got some written inputs from Vermaiden, who's actually joined today. And there's also some interest from developers to join the efforts. I received some email from Sergio, but unfortunately he had to move back out because he's actually involved in the redesign of the website, and that is taking priority at the moment because they intend to close that down. And so that is taking his energy at the moment. Vitaly joined, and I'll dig into that a little bit later on because there's stuff going on in regards to the guest migration. And there was also some inputs from the community, and Greg also had conversations on that because I think we noticed that there clearly is some interconnection between OCI and bhyve, obviously because of the virtualization technology. And I think so that is also good that we keep that alive, this crossover, so when people want to know more about OCI, to refer them back and forth. We started also spreadsheet, just like we had one started by Michael Dexter and by Dave Kotelhuber, who outlined the different kinds of feature sets and desired features coming out of the weekly calls for jails. Now we have also one for bhyve that is, I think, a good complement. And on top of that, I want to point out, I don't know, maybe you guys want to share something offline or online, I don't mind, but if you have inputs, because I started reading Jono Bacon's The Art of Community, because my experience over the past few weeks in terms of, let's call it project management, was on the one hand side that I need to focus my own time and resources, but also that the usual approach in terms of project management when it comes to agile and waterfall is not really what we're doing here. This is more communicating, keeping people on top of things, and bringing stuff to the attention of different kinds of people, and really connecting a lot of stakeholders. Right. Let's move to the next one, please. So when we look at this big picture that we painted the last time, I think we can at the moment say that we're juggling three balls at the moment. This is the state management right in the front. There's also some activity in regards to this network and bridge handling, and the guest migration, which is kind of in the back because there was this multi-node management in the middle, but because of the functionality and because there's already stuff happening there, I kind of pulled that up front. And when we move to the next slide, please, I want to start giving a couple updates on these three sections, basically. So in regards to state management, Jan has done some great work in conjunction with S6RC, particularly in terms of process supervision, because this is kind of the underlying problem also with bhyve. And I think it's also a combined effort with jails. I put the links in there if you're interested. I was fascinated also that basically you can really speed up things in terms of boot times. If you bring S6RC into the regular RC setting. Nonetheless, I understand that this is not something that's probably going to move into base anytime soon. However, I think it is definitely worthwhile investigating further. And once Jan feels confident enough to publish that, obviously there's going to be people who want to start testing, documenting, and supporting that further. Jan also published, and I think this is also, you see there's different kinds of pieces of the puzzle that kind of start to construct a larger picture. This MKI pair thing, this also ties into what Jan mentioned before we started the recording, that we are facing this state management of devices, jails, bhyve, and bringing this all together in a sense that makes it more manageable, easier in terms of management for the users. I personally also looked at KQ because I still believe that this might be something worthwhile to investigate in terms of tracking state changes across jails and bhyve. I don't want to dig into the details today. I think this is something to discuss more deeply in the weekly calls, and I will raise that next week. So I'm very much looking forward to getting feedback and having a lively discussion on that. Right. Let's move to the next one. Yeah, network management. That is something that I kind of followed Uri Levine's suggestion. I did my best to stay on stay with the focus on the actual problem and not the solution. So I started to write up all the kind of issues and tasks and constraints that we're looking at in terms of network management. I also put that into the product requirement document, and out of the conversation came the pointers towards CNI, Container Network Interface. And I think this is definitely a very great resource. I also found out that there's even already a port implementing that. And I'm going to investigate that further, how we can tie that into what we are already doing, how that is going to fit the picture. So this manageability of container, of VM and jails, network structures and networking within FreeBSD is also starting slowly to move forward. And I think this CNI is very promising. Right. Next one, please. Finally, with the guest migration, I think this is the most complicated or most complex, let's say not necessarily complicated, but complex topic. There is, as you can see, I compiled this list of different reviews that have been started. Some of them have been completed. Some of them are basically arguably in limbo because of the fact that it is a complex topic. A lot of the work has been contributed by the University of Bucharest. I suppose most of you guys actually are aware of their work on bhyve and snapshotting and guest migration. And they started to split up the work to make it easier in sort of, digesting their changes in an attempt to migrate or merge that into base. Nonetheless, during this kind of ongoing reviews, there was the realization that with the approach of snapshotting and how they do snapshotting or how they implemented snapshotting, that there is a need to refocus some effort on improving the snapshot file format, because at the moment it's really just writing out 3 files, and those 3 files are, let's say, hard to digest and not necessarily, let's say, it might not be the best way to transport the information of a VM from one host to another. So moving to the next slide. Next slide, please, Greg. Thank you. So I also started to do some, let's say, documentation and diagramming in terms of what is going on, how the University of Bucharest started implementing that, because I figured when we bring more people into the conversation, it would obviously be helpful to get up to speed, how things work, how they are connected. So I will also keep working on that, because I think it's going to make it easier and faster to complete that conversation. And this is just the start of things. Basically, how they implemented this connection between the user space when a user wants to take a snapshot. For example, they are using NV-list structures to communicate over a Unix socket with bhyve, and then bhyve does the actual checkpointing of the VM and writes those 3 files into the file system. And those 3 files then are, if they do the guest migration, they're sending that over a regular TCP port without any kind of checks, safety guards, security, nothing. It's basically just writing on a TCP port. And you can imagine in today's world, this might have been a good and reasonable approach, let's say 20 years ago, but today with, I don't know, zero trust and all sorts of other, security concerns on a network, there might be let's say additional work that probably is worthwhile to put into that to make it more stable and also a lot more secure. Right. Moving to the next slide, please. Yeah. Clearly, the university has worked on that for a while. So I collected all their slide decks and their papers that I could find and compiled them on this slide here for us to read on if you're interested. And they clearly put a lot of thought into that. I think that is great. And there is a lot of work already there. And I think we can definitely work on most of that. As I mentioned before, right now it's writing 3 files. There is no tool set to analyze those files. There is no real tooling. There is no consistency checks. And they're using, as I said before, they're using NV-list for encoding. And this, at least in my initial conversations, has proven to be a, let's say, controversial topic. Moving to the next slide. There are definitely multiple approaches that one could choose, to encode the information, tarring them. There's also conversation in terms of, do we want to keep the tooling more in the user space or should it be more in a kernel module? This conversation has been going on in this mailing list thread that I linked up here. There's also standards like, I don't know, the open container format. So you can see there's different approaches to this problem, and I think it's worthwhile to have a broader conversation on that. And I already mentioned before Vitaly, who's been proposing a change to this snapshot file format on the mailing list and also on Fabricator. He recently joined the weekly bhyve calls, and he indicated that he wants to keep working on that. I also reached out on him on LinkedIn, and he indicated, okay, he's still very much interested in working on that, and he believes he needs to, or he's interested in first, creating some code base so people can better understand what he's actually suggesting. So he's interested in creating some code base, putting that up on Fabricator again, and then having some reviews on that. I personally think it would very much worthwhile to have either a broader conversation during the weekly calls or have a separate call, because I don't want to proliferate the review pile that we already have on Fabricator. So I think it's not necessarily the best approach to put more reviews into Fabricator, because it's just going to increase the complexity of things that we have on the table. Nonetheless, I think it's great that that we keep the conversation alive and that we have restarted the conversation, because it kind of got stuck in June this year. And this way we have it revived, basically. Right. Let's move to the next slide, please. So I also want to point out, even once we have that snapshot file format settled, then there's still additional challenges waiting ahead of us, because this bhyve snapshot feature is at the moment still disabled. It's not enabled by default. Even in 14, it's disabled, at least to my knowledge. If I'm wrong, please let me know in the chat. And right, as I said before, I think it's going to be worthwhile to keep the conversation alive, bring in additional stakeholders like Corvink. He's been involved with all the reviews on Fabricator, so he's definitely one of the most knowledgeable persons to speak out on in terms of the ongoing reviews and what is on the table already. I would hope to bring in the people from the University of Bucharest. They've been very active also on Fabricator. Nonetheless, again, I believe it's probably going to be easier to have an online conversation in person than going back and forth via email over multiple weeks. And finally, I think there's a bunch of corner cases and special cases that are warrant discussion. How do we handle incompatible CPU architectures? Because right now it would be, I think it would have to be identical systems moving a VM from one host to another. The hosts would have to be identical for it to work. What about having insufficient resources on the target host, missing the disk image, and so on and so forth? And we could probably come up with all sorts of additional, problem statements that would need addressing. And I think it's you could argue a very interesting computer science problem. So I think hopefully it's going to be easy to find developers and interested stakeholders to continue the conversation, and that's gonna make the solution better, I think, at the end of the day. Right. So let's move to the next slide. Right. So what are the next steps from my side? So obviously, I want to keep continuing attending the regular weekly calls. I already mentioned I want to raise this KQ option, and I want to get input on that and hear the thoughts of the community on that. I understand that Jan mentioned during the last call that NVList might not be the best approach. I want to dig into that a little and better understand what his experience is there, because I need to admit I was not able to follow completely during the last call, so I'm going to rewatch the recording before joining the next call. And obviously, also I'm very much looking forward to seeing Jan's work on S6RC being published and start testing that. I plan to meet up with Dave on December 7th. So if anyone is in the Vienna area, please let me know. Obviously, please join us if you like. And I already mentioned I'm very much interested in organizing a call with the relevant stakeholders around the snapshot file format, because I think the online call format is definitely proven a good setting to speed things up, particularly when there's question marks and unclear and open issues. So I think that's definitely great. And I want to keep reading different kinds of documentations that we're seeing, the research papers. I've started reading the spec on CNI, and I'm going to keep digging into the code base around bhyve, and keep elaborating on the documentation, because I think that's worthwhile when we move into the online calls, to have something to hold on to, right? And I'm also, finally, I have to admit, I did not get around to actually organizing additional calls, but I'm considering shifting between maybe doing some online surveys. Basically, it's going to be the question whether people are interested in having online calls, or whether people prefer to, just do a couple clicks and we could get some state of the union understanding of where we are at the moment with bhyve and jail's requirements. Let's move to the next one. And this is the last one. And this is kind of a call out also into the community, because again, unfortunately, I cannot clone myself. I would love that, but there's so much more that we could do. And I want to point out, this is not sorted by priority. This is just a couple of things that are still on my mind that I would love to do, but I choose at the moment to park, because I want to focus on those other items first, because I think they're going to produce more benefit for the community and for the ongoing work stream. I think we would all benefit from a cleanup in terms of the different open issues that we have on Bugzilla. I also want to elaborate on the construction of a roadmap of all the stuff that is happening, because as you can see, just by focusing on those 3 activities, how much stuff is happening at the same time. There's so many ongoing, so much ongoing work, and all is happening in parallel. And partially, there is some conversation on the mailing lists. Some is happening on Fabricator. Bringing all those people together and make them understand where each other have some opportunity for some synergies, let's say, is quite challenging. And I think a roadmap would definitely help there. And I think a good example is, for example, how I just realized that there's a CNI port by doing some research, and again, just by mentioning the network requirements being CNI was brought to my attention, right? And I think it would also be worthwhile to investigate in terms of the existing ports that we have surrounding jails and bhyve, what kind of bugs have been there, what kind of issues have been waiting for resolution. Because again, remembering or reminding us all that this workstream kind of originated out of, well, I don't want to call it frustration, but let's say the feedback from Johannes that there's all these sorts of ports, but very often it's just really a one-man show, and this one maintainer cannot get to all the open issues at the same time. And obviously, we're not resolving that by just creating another port. So it's also very much about probably supporting those existing ports and either helping them out or help them find additional resources to resolve the open issues. And if a port has been abandoned for whatever reason, learn from the open issues that are still open there, to either bring it to the attention of the existing ports or consider them in terms of what can we do in base, or what can we do in terms of the existing research that we're doing. And finally, as I mentioned before, considering surveys to better understand where our stakeholders are and what the needs are. So that's it from my side at the moment. I don't know if there's any questions. Please feel free to ask, and I'm going to do my best to answer.
Chris, thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing and for that fantastic update. It's such a tremendous service to this community. So thank you for the organization and structure that you're putting around this effort. There are some questions in the chat. So take a look at those real quick. You may have answered them as you were going, but have a look there, and then why don't you tackle those, and then I have a couple of questions as well.
Right. So in regards to the questions that I'm seeing here, Unix socket or transport encryption, yes. So I think that's probably both. bhyve control and bhyve at the moment is just a regular Unix socket. The transport between the host to host is actually just a regular TCP port, from what I remember. So there is, I believe, no encryption going on, if I'm not mistaken. So again, KTLS and I don't know, there's so many possibilities that one could approach that. Again, I think that that is a very complex topic, and I would love to continue that conversation during the weekly calls, because I think we also have other topics waiting for this call. Right. There's stuff locked behind bhyve snapshot feature. Yes, that is absolutely right. Yeah, what do I mean by KQ for jails and bhyve? Well, we talked about state management for jails and bhyve, and we had a conversation around possibly creating a daemon, that watches the different kinds of states that a jail and a bhyve VM is in, whether it is has started already, whether it is shutting down, whether it has been shut down. These kinds of events could be exposed with a KQ or with a K event, and then consumed. Obviously, that would be limited to a C program, but I think if we had a daemon, it could also it would allow us probably to expose that to Lua or shellcode if we wanted to. And then again, I'm not necessarily the smartest person in the room, so I'm just pointing out and asking a question. So again, I think that might be totally worthwhile to continue the conversation during the weekly calls, because again, I think that is probably a very complex topic, tying back into the question of what is it that we want to address at the end of the day. Right. What else is there? Yes, that is correct. Yes, there are already K events that we could tie into. That is actually a very good point, Jan. That is absolutely right. I did not think about that. You're you're right. That should actually work.
So for bhyve, there is a KQ event filter for processes and process descriptors. So if you know the process ID in a hopefully race-free way, or you can get a process descriptor for the bhyve process, you can register interest in this event with a KQ, and then you get the exit status, which is what you mostly care about. And you don't have to poll for it.
Exactly.
You only have to wait for the kernel to send readiness. But that tracks the lifetime of the bhyve process, which for most intents and purposes is equivalent to the bhyve guest.
Yeah, that's correct. It would still have to stay alive for the whole period, and I guess, yeah.
No, your subscriber can restart, so that's not a problem. The problem is that for jails, this doesn't work because the jail itself
Exactly.
isn't a process. But
Exactly.
I've found a workaround I want to try for FreeBSD 14.
Okay.
And that is that there are two kernel modules you should be able to combine in an unexpected way to get polling-free notification of jail state changes.
Okay.
So there is a devctl, which can only have one consumer, isn't good
Right.
enough on its own, but on FreeBSD 14, there is a kernel module to turn devctl messages also into netlink generic multicast messages, so that you can have multiple best effort subscribers. But those subscribers, if they fall behind, get just told that they have missed a message. In that case, they have to resynchronize by walking the jail list. And the other thing they can do is you have to load a kernel module to get devctl notifications about jail state changes. But such a kernel module has existed for years, even if it is not in base. It's in ports and hasn't been broken in a long time. So this interface isn't moving quickly. Stability isn't the problem there. And with that, you should be able to get very low latency efficient notification about jail state changes. It would be asynchronous, so you can't rely on the jail still being in the state, or prevent it from progressing into another state. But that's almost always the right call to make for an API anyway. So yeah, there's that. And with these two mechanisms available, it should be possible to build a daemon which basically subscribes to all jail state changes and responds to them by executing hooks.
I would suggest, Jan, let's continue that in the weekly calls, because I think it's a great approach, and I remember you indicated that you were thinking about this approach recently. I would love to continue that. Yeah. All right. Anyone? Any other questions? I think that's it for the moment.
Yeah, I think you got from the chat. Before I do my questions, Chris, is there anybody else on the call who has any thoughts, comments, questions for Chris? Oh, good. You're about to say something, Chris.
I just wanted to point out that Vermaiden also made some great points on the Google mailing list.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Vermeiden, if you want to add any of the point, add anything that you already mentioned in writing.
I have some more ideas as we have gathered here. For example, some things are bigger, some things are smaller. I think for the future we could think about some kind of like VMware has a distributed switch when you're in one place set up networking for multiple nodes to not do it multiple times. Of course, we are currently far from that state where we have multi-node cluster and just do vMotion between the hosts, but while doing all this work, we can have that in mind that maybe in the future some decisions taken now can make that easier in the future. On the GitHub, I have seen some repository for bhyve for simpler bhyve USB pass-through for single port for single device. And to be honest, it's probably dead, not used now. It was probably some proof of concept to make it single USB device or port pass through to bhyve virtual machine and not entire PCI controller. But looking at what was the process of adding it there, I think it's the opposite that we want to achieve here. It was very not easy, kind of like Kubernetes stuff, I would joke. So yeah, I will probably after that meeting gather also my thoughts and think about other things, and as earlier share my thoughts what can be improved or added or things like that. Other thing I am also thinking is for the PCI devices pass-through. I recently have some fun with it recently, but it is not obvious which PCI devices you can pass through and which you cannot. After messing around with it for some time, I got to know that the device needs to support MSI and interrupts. So that is the first and most important requirement. So it would be good to have some tool or command that will show you which devices on your computer can actually be passed through. It can be a flag for PCI conf or other tool or whatever, just a thought as we are talking. I'm also curious about this S6 for state management, but I need to first get more into that, so no comments now. The part that got my interest was replacing part of RCD init system. So we will have some kind of hybrid now. So yeah, that's my thoughts for now, I think. And as I said, I will also gather all of this into some more well-aligned, organized mail, or I assume for the new mailing list. So I think that's it from my side for now.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Yes, thanks. So you don't need to really respond, Chris, to my questions, but I want to just put them out there for you to think about. So one is, you know, I would be very interested in your thoughts, not necessarily, like I said, not now, right? But at some point, like what you think a MVP, a minimum viable product would look like, right? And sort of obviously not holding you to it because there's a lot of variables and a lot of things that are out of, you know, everybody's control. But like if you had to guess based on what you've seen so far, like when you think that might be like best case available. And that kind of gets to your roadmap construction point, I think, right? So and it's hard. I get it, right? It's really difficult. And that leads into my second question, which is, you know, be thinking about, and you already are, right? So I shouldn't word it that way, but like, let me know, like, where you see the resource gaps, the really acute resource gaps, right? Clearly, like the foundation is, limited in terms of the people and the money that we have, but it's not non-existent. And some of the things that can sometimes be very helpful is, like, for instance, a hackathon, like a meetup, right? Like, I can sort of really but we want to make sure that will really help, right? That will unstick something that we could, if we got this group of people together, right? And then, let's try to figure out how we make that happen, right? And there's other things. That's just like sort of a for instance, but but sort of keep that in mind and let me know.
I think we can definitely. I think we can
Yeah.
definitely construct something out of the work elements that we already have, because I think that should probably sort of be priority one. Those three components that we've been talking about. And I think the more challenging task is going to be putting a timeline behind it.
Right.
But I understand you're right.
Yeah. No. And keep those things in mind together. Like, well, sort of ceteris paribus, like, things being as they are today, I think the timeline is right. And then be like, ask yourself, like, what would accelerate that? What could accelerate that? Right.
Yes.
And because, like, I can't guarantee that the answer is going to be yes, but I can guarantee that I won't be able to say yes if I don't know what the question is, right? So if you're like, I think if we could get a 4-day hackathon at the University of Bucharest with, support for travel for a handful of people, we could really accelerate this, right? Now, I mean, and obviously I'm not going to be like, well, did we, right? And, show me the evidence, right? Like, because clearly you put a lot of work into this, and I think really, gotten this project along quite a ways. And so, I want to make sure that we're providing as much support as we possibly can, in the ways that will help.
One thing that also jumped into my mind recently when I started to compile my slides, I realized I think this is also very much about visibility, because there might be people, even volunteers, even volunteer developers interested in joining and helping out, but they don't even realize that there's things open and waiting. So maybe it makes sense, to also add additional information to, we have, I think, I don't know, wanted projects or something like that. We have that up to enrich that with additional information from the working group. So yes, I completely agree. Yeah.
And and we do have a marketing team, right? And so if you feed me, like, these are the things that I would love to get some visibility into, I can, make sure that we do whatever we can do to promote that and get as many eyes on that as possible. So yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, of course. Yeah, for sure. That's literally what I'm here for.
Pat raised his hand. I think he's got a question.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just my opinion. This is my first attendance, and I'm just sitting here and watching and listening, and I'm really amazed at all the great work that is going into the project, and snapshots and live migration and everything are of course great, and I could not say which of the features I would prioritize in any way, because I'm more or less perfectly content with what we have at the moment. We have replaced an outdated VMware cluster with bhyve using TrueNAS on 2 large Epic systems, NVMe only, and we run all our virtualized workloads, which is Linux and Windows, on these 2 systems, and then we just do ZFS snapshots while the machines are live and replicate them from one system to the other one as a form of cold standby. So should one of the systems ever die, we have manual operator intervention, and then we just boot the VMs that have been replicated, which works really well for us. So I really don't have anything to add with all these new great features that I, of course, would love to see realized. The most pressing thing that is missing at the moment is some sort of TPM handling, either via hardware pass-through or TPM emulation.
That's for Windows
Because
11.
because when we talk about hypervisors, people are going to run Windows workloads in them. This is the elephant in the room. If people cannot run Windows 11 by the support end of Windows 10, we're out of business effectively. I would have to buy VMware by that time.
FreeBSD 14 includes Corvin Colm's TPM pass-through,
Ooh,
and I'm
hi,
coordinating
Michael.
with him and Goran to do TPM emulation based on the IBM permissively licensed component that QEMU is working. So please do follow the notes on what's taking place rather than
great.
comment on the absence of that activity.
I'm not claiming that the activity was absent. So not at all. Just it's not on the agenda today, and it wasn't on the slides as ongoing work. That was everything.
Well, I think that just to show, there's so much going on, and bringing everything into one picture is, I think, almost impossible. But I think, tying this into, as Greg mentioned, bringing this into a minimum viable product where everyone can understand, okay, we are moving these pieces together and moving them forward as a team, then we have a strong focal point that we can also use for marketing purposes, let's say.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick, for for sharing your use case and for bringing that up. And just from my perspective, like I did not take your comment about that as a criticism. So I think it was, it is hard. FreeBSD 14 just came out. I've read the release notes multiple times and have missed things. So Michael Dexter, I don't think that there was any malice intended at all. And Patrick, I really appreciate you sharing your perspective. Is there anything else that anybody would like to bring up? Because we have 10 minutes left, and I'm going to put myself at the beginning of the agenda next time, because I don't like following Chris, because Chris is way too productive, and I have much less to share. But I don't want to cut this short, because this has been a really great discussion. Does anybody have anything for Chris before we move on? Okay, let's go. So Joe, is there anything that you would like to share about the sort of status of the OpenJDK? I know you've received a lot of really great candidates and are in the process of reviewing. Do you want to maybe just say a couple words on that?
Yeah, I'll try. I'm struggling with respiratory illness, so if there's a chance I'll have a coughing or sneezing fit, but it's fine. I don't feel too bad. It's just a risk that I might be silent or go invisible for a second. But I'll give a quick update. So I'll give a really quick recap. This process all started off when Michael Osipov, who works with in an enterprise setting, gave some feedback about how we can improve one of the components for his work, which was better Java support. And so I started off by contacting people that know more about Java and Java on FreeBSD, people like Greg Lewis. And I also had some really fruitful conversations with someone at OpenJDK who works on the build system. So he was very frank. So I don't want to give his name, but he explained that there are going to be challenges here. So there is some friction in that there has been some ideas that a lot of the work with FreeBSD and Java has been sort of drive-by, like there's a burst of activity and then code is left for upstream to deal with. And so we want to move beyond that. We want to show that that were willing to put in a larger commitment and get Java on FreeBSD working well. And he offered lots of constructive suggestions for how to do that. So I'll give just maybe an example or two. So a lot of the code for FreeBSD is intertwined in shared code, like it's not OS specific. And so a first step would be to unentangle that code, because OS specific code will be much more readily accepted upstream if it's not going to risk polluting or causing problems with other OSs. Another suggestion he had was to a related suggestion is dealing with shared code. So apparently, especially in hotspot where they're apparently quite conservative, Mac OS is labeled with BSD. So that's another example of code that's like tangled together. So if we want to make an improvement or a change or a fix to FreeBSD, we could be affecting the Mac OS. So he strongly recommended we lay the groundwork there where we unentangle that and then have better luck working with upstream. And then there's the other things like getting good CI support, which will likely involve some of the other projects here with like GitHub Actions that I know is going to require some work to have Microsoft accept our .NET port. And so with all that information in hand, we've started interviewing candidates. We've interviewed 4 and they're very strong, I'd have to say. They're all a little bit different. Some of them have experience working on FreeBSD and good Java experience. So I think we're going to find someone that's suitable for this project. We have, excuse me, we have 3 or 4 more left to go. I think by the time we have the next meeting, I'll probably have another update for everyone on that. I think I'll stop there before my voice completely goes.
All right. Thank you, Joe. I hope you feel better. Okay. So Active Directory, in addition to this, I've started a, let me make sure that I'm unmuted. I've started a products requirement document. I've pulled in some stuff that Antranig posted in Google Groups into the PRD, and you know, I'm trying to determine how much of the challenge with Active Directory integration is a documentation challenge, like is a sort of, this is the best practice, this is how to do it, this is the way you should do it, this is how you need to configure this, that, and the other, versus, you know, like development. And so I will be communicating with Michael Osipov about that. He's indicated that sometime in the next couple of weeks, he'll be able to put some attention into that. So that's the status there. So good news. The authors of 2 of the kind of leading sort of experimental implementations, contagious, now my nose is itchy, for a OCI runtime extension for FreeBSD have gotten together and proposed an official working group. So the Open Container Initiative, I think it's the Technical Steering Committee, Technical Oversight Board, I'm not exactly sure what they're called, has to meet and you know, decide on that. Once that's, and I'm monitoring the situation, so once there's an update, I'll post it on the new mailing list, and you know, would encourage anybody who's interested in participating to join that effort. So good forward momentum there. Really excited about that. Yeah. So Joe mentioned this. We have been working with everybody who we can think of to work with at Microsoft to try to get the port upstreamed so that FreeBSD is supported in .NET and therefore in GitHub Actions, which is a bit of a blocker for every open source project that uses GitHub Actions, because that's what they need to use in order to automate the tests that everything's working. And so the lack of FreeBSD support is a blocker. We're going to keep working on that and keep pushing on that. But at some point, we will determine that, we're not going to get what we need for Microsoft in the time that we need it anyway. And we'll start looking at what our backup options are there. So like, for instance, we could stand up a Cirrus CI instance, that's really not a good solution for us because that requires, a lot of work on our side. But we need to make sure that, that we're supporting our FreeBSD users and this lack of .NET support and for FreeBSD is creating friction that we need to solve. So thanks to everybody who provided provided their input on kind of like what their wish list is for sort of, GPU AI CUDA support in FreeBSD. I've passed that on to NVIDIA and have continued to have conversations with them. And we're working towards a possible in-person meeting later this month. So, I'm continuing to work on that to try to, see if there's an opportunity to partner with NVIDIA to get that support. And hope to have, a more concrete update for everybody soon. That's everything. Are there any questions for me?
There's one in the chat from Michael, whether you had a chance to talk to AMD on the IOMMU support issue.
Yeah, we've had some good conversations there. Nothing to report yet.
Cool. Thank you. Appreciate it. Because that's, burning users. And I think you recall that from Coimbra. Thank you for doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yep. My pleasure. What other questions do people have?
Michael, what specifically with respect to the IOMMU support were you interested in?
Let's see. So I don't know if you met Santiago Martin in Coimbra, but there are some open issues, and I'm going to do a quick search of the bhyve call log here. There are definitely some bugs. John Baldwin agrees that's a bug, and we tied it down to pretty reproducible issues relating to pass-through and SRIOV on AMD, which has obviously not been exercised as much as it could over the years. So I'll try to find those ticket numbers for you.
All right. Yeah. I mean, if you want to just send them to me offline, otherwise, if they're not handy, I would be interested in taking them.
Oh, and I appreciate that. So yes, I'll have those in just a moment. So go ahead and jump onto other topics.
Sounds good. All right. What other topics do people have? Comments, questions?
I have one more question, actually. I just realized. There was a question coming from the community where we have listed on the wiki that we're working on bringing SMBFS code over into FreeBSD as a sort of donation. And they were wondering what kind of donation it is. My assumption was that this is probably something of a what's it called? Instead of bringing it from GPL maybe to BSD license, relicensing effort. But I'm not sure. So I basically wanted to ask what kind of conversation it is or what kind of approach we're having there.
Basically, it's it's an implementation that we are hoping we will be able to get donated, and that's pretty much all I have at this time. I don't have a lot more detail about it. So, as that
is it closed source or because why is it a donation?
Well, code, just like a code contribution, right? Code contribution, right? So like a commit, like But I don't know, Ed, if you have any more color that you feel like you can add at that, but it's something that we're working on trying to get. And as soon as we have any more info on that, we will share it.
Got it.
Yeah, I think the color I can provide is that there are a number of SMB effectively like kernel or kernel equivalent side implementations out there under various different licenses, it would be wonderful if one of those can be made under a BSD license, and there are discussions to see if such a thing can happen.
Okay, figured as much. Thank you.
Yep. No, thanks for the question.
I have one question, if there's time for that, about
Yeah.
the state of OpenSSL in base. I am, of course, aware of the effort to change to OpenSSL 3 and the huge amount of work that went into that, but we are facing lots of customer complaints now with OpenSSL when customers run external security audits for Relay 13, because in 13.2, which is still a supported release, there is an OpenSSL version that has various OpenCVEs and can only be fixed by using OpenSSL from ports. So the question is that just the official state of affairs, that I am supposed to rebuild all my packages with OpenSSL from ports, or will these security fixes get merged into base eventually?
So our intent is to keep the OpenSSL 1.1.1 whatever in stable 13 up to date with respect to security fixes, which is absent upstream support for that. That likely involves collaborating with Debian or Red Hat or any other sort of people in the Linux world who are also maintaining a version, a copy of that OpenSSL beyond its upstream EOL. So to that end, I think if you have CVEs that are reported from scanning software, definitely send them to Sec Team or just send them to me directly. The broader issue of scanning software complaining about OpenSSL 1.1.1 in general, I'm not sure what.
No, it's the particular version that they're complaining about. Base has 1.1.1T, and the current version from port and also the last supported version from the OpenSSL upstream project is W.
Oh, okay, and that, yeah,
just
okay.
wondering when we are finally going to import them.
So I mean, we have them in stable 13.
But not in 13.2.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, we're following the dot releases for production, so we're running 13.2 it is. And
yeah,
that branch should receive security fixes, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that the same comment I think applies. If you can provide the specific CVEs that are being reported, I'll see what Sec Team may be able to do. I'm not entirely sure how much of a difference there is between what's in 13.2 and what's in stable now, to comment on whether it's feasible to just do a wholesale update, or if we cherry pick fixes.
Okay. I'll send you a message, of course.
All right. Thanks, Patrick. Thank you, Ed. Let's see here. It looks like there's a bunch of comments in the chat. Is there anything that anybody would like to make sure we talk about before we end the call? Because we're a couple minutes over. We're good? All right. Well, thanks everybody. I hope you all have a wonderful weekend. If you're in Europe, I guess you're almost there. So congratulations. We will continue to kind of, schedule meetings when there's a reason to meet. So be on the lookout for that. And yeah, as soon as I'm sort of clear that the mailing list is up and running and functioning, I will put out a message on Google Groups, to say, subscribe, and all future communication will happen over there. But I'm hoping that that'll be starting next week. So thanks again, everybody, and we will see you all online.
Thank you, Greg.
Thank you
Yes.
also. Great weekend to you all.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.